Picture this. You're Nigel Farage. You've just won your first ever local council. You're ready to show everyone how brilliant Reform UK is at actually governing. And then suddenly the entire Labour government decides to make you public enemy number one. Sounds like a political thriller, right? Well, buckle up, because this is actually happening right now in Kent. Welcome back to UK Political Insights, where today we're unpacking what might be the most dramatic local council saga in recent history. We've got accusations of government coups, claims of politically motivated attacks, leaked budget disasters, and the Deputy Prime Minister personally weighing in to call a local council chaotic. This is local government gone absolutely nuclear, and it is spectacular. So let's set the scene. Kent County Council, for those of you not obsessed with local government structures, is a pretty big deal. It's one of the largest county councils in England, serving over 1.5 million people. And then the 2025 local elections, something genuinely historic happened. Reform UK, Nigel Farage's insurgent party that everyone said would never actually win power anywhere, actually won Kent County Council, their flagship local authority, the jewel in Reform's very modest crown. This was supposed to be their moment to prove they weren't just a protest party, that they could actually govern, that all those promises about cutting waste and running things efficiently weren't just hot air. Narrator, it has not gone well. Reform figures are now claiming that the Labour government is running a coordinated campaign to undermine confidence in Kent County Council, specifically to create a pretext for Whitehall to step in and seize control, which, if true, would be absolutely extraordinary. We're talking about a democratically elected local authority being deliberately sabotaged by the national government because they don't like which party won. That's banana republic stuff. But before we get too carried away with conspiracy theories, we should probably look at what's actually been happening in Kent, because the reality is somehow even messier than the accusations. The attacks on Kent County Council have been coming thick and fast from Labour's top brass. And we're not talking about backbench MPs having a pop. We're talking about the big guns. David Lammy, who is both Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, literally stood up in the Commons and accused the Reform-led administration of presiding over chaos. He said the council had become a symbol of poor governance. That's the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom using parliamentary time to absolutely eviscerate a local council. When was the last time you saw that happen? And it wasn't just Lammy. Keir Starmer himself told MPs he sympathized with Kent residents whose lives were being disrupted by staggering incompetence. Staggering incompetence. Those are the Prime Minister's words about a local council run by his political opponents. Now, you might be thinking, surely Reform must have done something absolutely catastrophic to warrant this kind of attention from the top of government. Well, let's look at what's actually happened. For starters, there's the political assistance controversy, which is deliciously ironic given Reform's entire brand. Remember, they campaigned on cutting waste and saving money. That was their whole thing. Government's too bloated, too many bureaucrats, we'll come in and run things lean and efficient. Classic populist pitch, and they clearly resonated with Kent voters. So what did they do once they actually got into power? They proposed spending nearly £100,000 a year on political assistance. Let that sink in for a moment. 100 grand on political assistance to support party groups and liaise with the press. Now, technically, they're framing this as essential support for councillors to do their jobs properly. But come on, this is exactly the kind of thing they said they'd eliminate. It's like campaigning against obesity and then opening a donut shop. The motion was proposed by Council Leader Lyndon Kemkerin and passed 65 to 26, which tells you Reform has a comfortable majority on the council. But here's where it gets even more awkward. Under council rules, only Reform and the Liberal Democrats qualify for these roles. So taxpayer money is being used to fund political assistance for specific parties, which opposition councillors quite rightly pointed out looks hypocritical and politically motivated. Critics have warned that this isn't about public services. It's about using public money for party purposes. And honestly, they've got a point. If you're spending 100 grand on press liaison officers for your political party while claiming you're all about efficiency and cutting waste, you're going to get called out for hypocrisy. That's just how politics works. Actually, scratch that. That's just how basic logic works. But wait, it gets worse. A leaked forecast has revealed that Kent County Council is facing a £60 million budget gap for 2026 to 27. £60 million, even with a full 5% council tax increase. Now, to be fair to Reform, they inherited a mess. Under the previous Tory administration, there was already a £20.1 million shortfall, so the financial problems didn't start with them. But the gap has tripled under their watch, which is spectacularly bad, going from a £20 million hole to a £60 million crater in the space of one budget cycle. Suggests that something has gone catastrophically wrong with either their planning, their spending, or both. This is where Reform's defense starts to look a bit shaky. Yes, local government funding is a nightmare across the entire country. Yes, they inherited problems, but they won the election by promising they could do better. They said they'd find savings, cut waste, and run things more efficiently than the establishment parties. Instead, they're spending 100 grand on political assistance and staring down a budget black hole that's 3 times bigger than the one they inherited. That's not quite the competent governance they promised. Now, let's talk about Richard Tice's response, because this is where things get properly conspiratorial. Tice, who's Reform's deputy leader and an MP for Lincolnshire, has come out swinging with some pretty serious allegations. He claims there's strong reason to believe that Labour is deliberately trying to sow a loss of confidence in Kent County Council specifically to justify sending in commissioners to take over. He says they've targeted Kent, and he suspects the government is going to send in commissioners either over Christmas or just into the new year. Tice has even said Reform will be ready to thwart what he's calling a coup in the courts. A coup. He's calling potential government intervention in a failing local authority a coup. That's incredibly loaded language, and it's a massive accusation. If the government really is planning to manufacture a crisis to justify taking over a democratically elected council because they don't like which party won, that would be a genuine constitutional scandal. But here's a problem with Tice's theory. It requires you to believe that Labour is orchestrating this entire thing, and that also requires you to ignore all the actual legitimate problems that Kent County Council has created for itself. Governments do send in commissioners to take over local authorities, and it's not unheard of. It happened in Northamptonshire, it happened in Croydon, it's happened in several other councils that got into serious financial or governance trouble. If Kent reaches that point, the government wouldn't need to manufacture a pretext. The pretext would be real. The question is whether Reform's governance is actually that bad or whether Labour is exaggerating the problems for political gain. Council leader Lyndon Kemkerin has echoed Tice's concerns, saying the council has been subject to a prolonged, vicious, and unsubstantiated campaign of attacks. Unsubstantiated is an interesting word choice there, because while some of the criticism might be politically motivated, the budget figures and the political assistance spending are very much substantiated. They're real. You can't just claim attacks are unsubstantiated when there are actual documents showing the problems. Labour, predictably, has absolutely rejected Reform's accusations. Their spokesperson called the claims utter nonsense, which is about as unequivocal as political denials get. But then, Labour's response got properly savage. They pointed out that Labour didn't suspend 9 Reform councillors for incompetence and disloyalty. Reform did that themselves. That's a pretty devastating comeback because it highlights internal chaos within the Reform group itself. If you've got your own councillors being suspended by your own party, you can't really blame Labour for your governance problems. The Labour spokesperson then went for the jugular, pointing out that it wasn't Labour that told Kent Reform councillors to suck it up if they didn't like the council leader's decisions. That was Reform's own council leader. So we've got internal discipline problems, we've got councillors being told to essentially shut up and accept decisions they disagree with, and we've got the party blaming Labour for pointing all this out. It's not exactly the competent, unified governance that voters were promised. Labour also pointed out that reform has failed to find the savings they promised and are now considering increasing council tax, which again is pretty damaging because reform's entire pitch was that they'd be more efficient than the establishment parties. If you can't find savings and you're having to raise taxes instead, that's the opposite of what you campaigned on. It's a broken promise, and broken promises are political poison, especially for insurgent parties whose entire appeal is based on being different from the mainstream. The Labour spokesperson finished with a proper zinger, telling Reform to grow up and start running Kent Council competently. Grow up. That's the kind of dismissive language you use when you think your opponents are behaving like children. It's contemptuous, it's patronizing, and it's designed to get under their skin. And based on Reform's reaction, it's probably working. So what's actually going on here? Is this a genuine government conspiracy to overturn democratic elections? Or is it Reform failing spectacularly at local government and then blaming everyone else for their problems? The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle, but closer to the latter than Reform would like to admit. Yes, Labour is absolutely piling on the pressure and loving every minute of it. When your political opponents win power and then immediately stumble, you don't just ignore it. You exploit it mercilessly. That's politics. But the problems Reform is facing in Kent are largely self-inflicted. The political assistance spending is their decision. The